Today, we remember Muriel Bachman, Jean Fuller, Gary Hickok, George Hoskin, Jan Johnson, Marianthe Johnston, Betty Staffinson, Helen Whipple,
on this All Saints Day, when we remember so many people in our lives, we read from the Gospel of Luke about this big and hard idea of what happens to our saints after they die. The Sadducees want some answers. Listen for how Jesus responds. A reading from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 20, verses 27 through 38. Some Sadducees, those who say there is no resurrection, came to Jesus and asked him a question. Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies, leaving a wife but no children, the man shall marry the widow and raise up children for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers. The first married and died childless. Then the second and the third married her, and so in the same way all 7 died childless. Finally, the woman also died. In the resurrection, therefore, whose wife will the woman be? For the 7 had married her. Jesus said to them, those who belong to this age marry and are given in marriage. But those who are considered worthy of a place in that age, and in the resurrection from the dead, neither marry nor are given in marriage. Indeed, they cannot die anymore, because they are like angels, and are children of God, being children of the resurrection. And the fact that the dead are raised, Moses himself showed in the story about the bush, where he speaks of the Lord as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Now he is God not of the dead, but of the living, for to him all of them are alive. May these words be to us our light and our life. Thanks be to God. We're going to start off today with a story from Little Mouse. You can see here Little Mouse sitting in church on All Saints Day. Little Mouse says to us, do you know any saints? I do. My grandmother and granddad used to read me stories from my children's Bible and teach me prayers. They were saints. Our neighbor goes to the soup kitchen and serves meals to people who don't have food. She is a saint. My best friend is a saint too because he plays with a boy during recess that all the other kids pick on. Saints are people who help others know God. We are all saints. Today we celebrate all the saints we have ever known, and especially the ones who have died. We celebrate that there is a little bit of God in everyone. Well, we all have a lot of saints on our hearts today, so many lifted up as our great cloud of witnesses. And this week I have some very special saints on my heart. I'm a 4th generation Cubs fan. And so I'm thinking of all those relatives and friends in my life who died before they got to see the Cubs win the World Series. And today I think especially of my grandma Luann, my dad's mom. We called her Grandma Lou. Grandma Lou loved Squirt, that funny soda that you don't see too often anymore. And she was a total Scrabble fiend. I could never beat her. She retired to Colorado, and she loved hiking and watching the buffalo graze out her window. But the thing she loved most by far was baseball. She and my grandpa would drive their kids in 45 miles into Chicago, and they would pack their ham sandwiches and sit in the bleachers and watch the game. It was a once-a-year affair, and it was a family holiday, a big deal. When she moved to Colorado, she became a Rockies fan, and she had season tickets. She went to games well into her 80s. My grandmother was unstoppable. When she died, we were debating where to scatter her ashes, and so we decided that some of them would go to one of her favorite hiking trails, and some of them would go to that field where we would watch the buffalo graze together. But some, the final container, had to make it back to Coors Field. So we as an extended family gathered and we went to a game. We didn't want to cause a game delay by putting the ashes on the field, so we decided to wait until the very end, and my brother, who was the youngest cousin, got stuck doing it. We figured he wouldn't get in trouble, or at least it was less likely he was a kid. So after the game's done, we all walk down the stairs, and we're standing kind of far back, and we send my brother to run down and scatter her ashes on the field. So he runs and does it, runs back up, and we see security start to prowl around the field. And then we see a few police officers, and my whole family takes off running, and we don't stop until we get to the car. It was totally wacky, totally off the wall. It was exactly the kind of thing my Grandma Lou would have loved. We all have these stories, we all have these ways of remembering, and they're important. It's important to find these rituals because when we lose our saints, we don't just lose their presence with us, we lose the possibility of a future. We lose that possibility to create more memories. We lose a sense of certainty about what life will look like for us. And we don't really know what happens to our loved ones after they die. The Sadducees are in that uncertain place when they ask Jesus about resurrection, this idea that after we die, we will have new life with God. They're trying to figure out the rules. When someone dies, isn't that what we're all trying to do? We want some comfort, some safety in knowing. These Sadducees come up with a riddle about a man who was married to, or a woman who was married to a bunch of different people and had no children, and what will happen to this woman. But what they're really trying to parse out is what exactly happens to us after we die. Will our loved ones come back to life? Will we be reunited with them? What can we know for sure? What can we expect? Jesus responds by telling them that their riddle isn't going to answer the deeper questions they have. These rules that we use to bind our society and our life together don't apply. He tells them that when our loved ones die, they become children of the resurrection, forever alive to God. Now, it's a comfort to hear that our loved ones are forever alive to God, but there's still pain and hurt in the fact that they are no longer alive to us. We still have confusion and uncertainty about what it really means for a person to be alive to God. Jesus gives the Sadducees an answer, but he doesn't really answer any of their questions. He doesn't tell the Sadducees where people's souls go after they die. He doesn't tell them what heaven looks like. He doesn't tell them whether the stories of following a bright white light are true. Jesus leaves all the big questions pretty unanswered. What do we do with all these unanswered questions? Well, one thing we can do is create rituals. We may not be certain of much when we encounter death, but we know how to remember. We can provide a container for our pain and uncertainty. We can provide one more chance to make memories. We remember our saints today as our cloud of witnesses. We remember them in memorial services. We remember them in illegal, impromptu rituals at ballparks. We all have ways of remembering, and when we remember our saints, we don't just recall our memories of them, but we remember. This word that means putting things back together in a new way. We put our memories and our hearts back together into a story that we tell about who we are, who our families are, how we all fit into the world. Jesus says that when people die, they become children of the resurrection. But I think that we, the people left to do the work of remembering, become children of the resurrection too. When we go through the process of grieving and sharing memories and weaving the threads into the narratives of our lives together, we transform a moment of death and loss into an opportunity for resurrection, for that new life. We can take our memories of our saints, the joys and the sorrows, and we can learn from them how to live well, how to love well, how our own stories and histories fit into the bigger stories of our families and our communities, and of God's great story. We become children of the resurrection too when we encounter death and when we feel the pain that comes with that. And then when we let God in to transform that pain into new life. We have a story in our Christian tradition about pain and death turning into new life. Jesus fought for the world to be a different kind of place, a place that celebrates and honors all creation, a place where the last are first and the first are last, a world where we live in harmony with God and in love for all. And that message, it turns out, was not always easy to hear. So Jesus died on the cross, but on the third day he rose again. Jesus proved to us that love wins, that new life can come out of hard places. Jesus promises us that we are all children of the resurrection. Today, when we come to the communion table, we will remember that story of transformation. We weren't there at that first special meal. That meal that Jesus shared with his disciples the night before he died and joined the communion of saints. But we can remember it. We can play a part in God's great story by taking this memory and making new meaning out of it. We connect, we build community, we get filled up with God's love so that we can share it. We become transformed by this bread and this cup that Jesus first transformed. Through this simple meal, through all our memories and our remembering, we become children of the resurrection. Thanks be to God. Amen.